Calendar Talk is a comprehensible input, or CI, activity that is part of many teachers' routines in the classroom. And it is essentially just that, talking about the calendar. Now, what began as simply saying the date has grown into so much more than that. So in this episode, I want to share with you my own process of doing a Calendar Talk activity that engages students on a wide variety of topics as we begin the class. Lots of language and culture is embedded into this activity organically. Sometimes the slides and materials can take quite a bit of time to create, but I don't want that to hold you back. So you can make a copy of my own Google Slides with all the embedded links right in the show notes. So let's jump in. Are you a language teacher looking for some reassurance that what you're doing in the classroom is on the right track? Or maybe you're looking for some ways to teach even more effectively. If you're one or the other or somewhere in between, you've landed in the right place. This is the World Language Classroom Podcast with your host, me, Joshua Cabral. You're about to get tips, tools, and resources so that your students continue to rise in proficiency and communicate with confidence. Let's jump in. Vamos, allons-y. Hello, my friends. Bonjour, mes amis. Hola, mis amigos. Welcome to the World Language Classroom Podcast. I am Joshua Cabral, and thank you, as always, for taking the time out of your week to listen to this podcast about language teaching. It's just one of the many things that I'm sure that you do that makes you an incredible teacher, devoted to your students, and really wanting to improve regularly on what you're doing in the classroom and get that reassurance that you are just exactly where you should be with your students. So thank you for being the dedicated educator that you are. So part of that dedication is listening to yet another teacher talk about Calendar Talk. Now, you've probably heard a lot about Calendar Talk. I've done other episodes where I've talked to other teachers that do Calendar Talk. But the thing about this is everybody does it a little differently. And when you hear about how other teachers are doing it, and even if you're doing it yourself, you might get a couple of new ideas to look at it in a different way. So it's always great to have these conversations to look at how we're doing something already, or to spark an interest to try it for the first time. So a Calendar Talk has really been an evolution. So the evolution of Calendar Talk in my classroom has been pretty extraordinary. It really started out as simply just saying the date to a very dynamic, engaging discussion that students really look forward to. Calendar Talk is a CI activity that incorporates vocabulary and culture and authentic communication. Now, it's not just about filling time where you're just saying the date. It's a daily opportunity to engage with students and to build proficiency incrementally. I spoke with John Seifert back on episode 170 just a couple of weeks ago, and he offered lots of useful and actionable insights into how he does Calendar Talk and how to make it just so much more than just calendars. So I wanted to share with you some things that I have been doing that have really grown over the last couple of years that I've been doing it so that you can have some ideas for your own as you engage in doing a Calendar Talk. So as I mentioned in the intro, you can copy the Google Slides that I'm going to reference right to your Google Drive. So if you go to the link in the show notes, you can get that. It'll just force a copy right into your Google Slides when you go to the link. Or you can go to WLClassroom.com, my website, /Calendar Talk. So WLClassroom.com/Calendar Talk. Because sometimes creating these slides can be pretty time intensive depending on how detailed you want to get. But I enjoyed putting it together, and I've been building on them over the years and how I do it. So why not take advantage of just taking that and putting it for free, by the way. You're not paying for this. You just get the link and you can get it right into your Google Drive, and you could start using it tomorrow. Now, the slides that I have on the link are in Spanish. So if you are a Spanish teacher, you could, in fact, start using them right away. If you teach another language, it's pretty obvious what all of the words are based on images on the screen and the way it's set up. So it could be easily translated, and you can use it as a template. So let's look briefly at the benefits of Calendar Talk before I get into the nitty-gritty of exactly how I do it and how useful it is and all of those things. So while you're doing a Calendar Talk, you're recycling vocabulary fairly naturally because there's frequent repetition of things like dates and times and weather and cultural details along the way that are going to reinforce that language acquisition. The fact that it is embedded within natural conversation helps to really solidify that for students. There's also those opportunities for cultural connections as you're exposing students to the cultural practices and geography of the target language countries, especially the way I'm going to talk to you about how I do it, where we move out of just talking about our own general world where we live and what's going on and how we connect that to other target language countries. And then another big benefit is just how it builds confidence in students. It's that regular practice that helps students feel more at ease communicating in the target language, particularly if you're beginning the class with this and it's routine and it's language that they're used to. They go into class right away feeling like this is something they can do. They can actually communicate on these topics and feel really confident as they're doing it, and then have that go into the class with them as you move on to other activities. So now let's look at the process and routine of doing a calendar talk. Now, I'm going to talk about it in a way first that is pretty much the way I think a lot of teachers go about it, but then I'm going to talk about how I extend it further and make it really communicative for students as well, and add a lot of cultural aspects in. So if you download the slides or you just go to my website, wolclassroom.com/calendar talk, you will see images of what my slides look like that I use with students. It also has the link there if you want to make a copy of the slides into your Google Drive. But if you want to see the visual of what I'm talking about, you can see it right there in the blog post. So wolclassroom.com/calendar talk. So the first thing we start with is just simply asking how we're doing. We do that either as a paired activity, or we'll do it standing in a circle and go around the circle and ask how we're doing. And the students like to have fun with it, where they have learned several different ways to ask how you're doing. You can do it formally, you can do it informally, you can say what's up or what's going on or how are you. So in Spanish, they know cómo estás, they know cómo está if they want to be more formal, but they also know qué tal, they also know qué onda. And so as we're going around doing that and we're asking, the only thing is you cannot repeat the same question back that somebody asked you. So if somebody says to you qué onda and you answer it and then you ask somebody else, you can't say qué onda, you have to say qué tal, cómo estás, o cómo está, or y tú, something that's different. So it's always this opportunity to do it differently. And you'll see on that first slide that there are images of different things that we might be feeling. We're doing well, we're doing okay, we're not doing well, we're tired, we're feeling pretty chill, students like that one, or if you're sick, or all of those different things. And there are images on the slide to help students with that, particularly if they are novice level, that's going to help them. But as you use it more, you're going to remove those scaffolds or not even have it up there at all and just make it part of your speaking routine. So once we've done some greetings, we start with the date. So this is a rather simple and straightforward way, and you can get as elaborate as you would like depending on the proficiency level of your class. So on this slide, I have the days, and then I have the numbers and the words for the numbers, and then the months, and it's in the structure where it tells them how to structure out saying the date. That is for very novice level students. As you are getting more advanced level students, you want to take some of that scaffolding off the slide and get to the point where you're not even using it at all, but you're just mentioning the date. So saying the date is just step one. And then if you look at the slide, you'll see that to the right, there are all these questions about what could possibly be happening on this date. So then we look at the details and questions, and we see what might be happening on this day during the week. Are there sports practices or drama practices? Is there a game? If so, where and who's the opponent? Was there a game yesterday? What was the score? Who won? Are there assignments in other classes going on this week? Or is it someone's birthday? Does anyone in your family have a birthday today? So there are lots of questions and comments to make the date more engaging for higher level students, such as looking at events that have happened on this date in history, either in your community or in your country, or in the country of the target language culture. So a lot of this is going to depend on the proficiency level of the class, but again, you're just starting with the date. So for novice level students, it'll stay there and maybe just talk about birthdays or a game happening, but it can get much more elaborate with more advanced students. And then you can also have students say what the date was yesterday and what it will be tomorrow, so you're practicing some things in other tenses as well. So lots of opportunities to introduce and embed vocabulary and structures into that discussion. And they'll also organically recycle this vocabulary as you repeat this activity in your classroom. So you can see you're just starting with the date, and originally that's all Calendar Talk was, but now there are all these ways that we're seeing that you can engage students in talking not just about the date, but things that are happening on the date as well. So after we looked at the date, we then move on to the weather. And there is also a slide that you'll see that has images of weather with phrases on it, so students can use that. For more advanced group, I don't have the words, I just have the images to support students. And then again, as you move on, you want to remove most of those scaffolds so that students are able to produce the language on their own. And again, you can talk about what the weather will likely be tomorrow. What have you heard about that? What was the weather like yesterday? If you want to practice different verb tenses so that students are not just always talking in the present tense. And these could just be some memorized phrases and language chunks that students are using to talk about these things. They don't necessarily have to know all the forms of the verb to talk in the future or the past, but they are just learning the structures that they need in order to have these discussions. So we start with our greetings and we do different things with that. Then we talk about the date and again, what's going on, what's the date tomorrow. And then we look at weather. Maybe we even look at the temperature so that we can talk about numbers and say what the temperature was yesterday, what it might be tomorrow. And so we have an opportunity to bring numbers and not just be talking about the weather itself. And again, talking about weather in different time frames will also help students that are more advanced be involved in that same discussion. And then we lastly move on to the time. And initially, I use a slide that has lots of support and scaffolding, and you'll see that in the download as well. But then I remove most of those details as we move on in proficiency, and students can rely on their own language to produce the time in the target language as well. So initially, they're going to have, if it is in Spanish, as the example you'll see, es las, son las, if they're talking about it. But then that is not on the screen anymore if they're more advanced. And then we're just talking about the time and what time does class start today? What time does it start on other days? What time does it end? What time did you arrive at school this morning? What time do you think you'll leave this afternoon? What time is your last class today? What time was your first class? So you don't just want to talk about what is the time right now, and organically put it into a communicative context. So that is a typical way that calendar talks can be done. So you're starting with the date, maybe you're talking about the weather, maybe you're talking about the time, and then perhaps you move on, even though you've used it as a communicative activity and engaging with students on it. But I want to talk to you now about how I take it a step further and start to embed some cultural aspects into it. Once we have talked about what's happening in our own community, so that's including the date, the weather, and the time, this is where the fun really begins with students. It's time to look at and compare these details to what's happening in the world, with a particular focus on target language countries. Now, there are many ways that you might want to go about this, but this is the process that has worked for me, and you will see that all of the links to do this are embedded in the slides that you can copy into your Google Drive. So the first thing is I have flags for the target language countries. So you'll see that these are flags of Spanish-speaking countries in the example on my blog. And so I put these flags into a small basket. So one student chooses a paper with a flag and identifies the country. Now they can seek help from a classmate if needed, but they begin to recognize them fairly quickly after a while. You may want to begin with the name of the country on the flag if students aren't used to seeing them. But then once we have the country, we have the flag, then we talk about some of the country details, such as the colors of the flag, the capital, the nationality, the location. Is it in North America, South America, Central America, the Caribbean? Is it in Europe? Is it in Africa? Is it in Asia? And to make this quick and easy to navigate, I have a slide that has 3 columns on it. It has map, it has weather, and it has time. And under each one of them, it has all of the Spanish-speaking countries listed, and each one is hot linked to a website. So under the maps, if a student chose the flag for Nicaragua, then we go to the map slide and you click on Nicaragua and it's going to bring you right to the Google map of Nicaragua. So you can have it projected. You can have students talk about what's to the north, what's to the south. You can talk about all of the various details about the country. What are the borders? What are other cities or towns or land features? Are there lakes? What are the oceans or seas? What borders to the north, south, east, west? But you have the link right there. And whatever country you click on, it's going to take you right to the Google map of that country. Then when we talk about the weather, we can see visuals and also look at how temperature is displayed. So if you click on the link again for Nicaragua under the weather, it's going to take you to the website for the Weather Channel, but in Spanish in this case. You can put it in different languages and you can see the weather. And the great thing is that there are visuals. Now, for countries that use a different system like Celsius or Fahrenheit, this is a great opportunity to practice numbers. For lower level students, I have a conversion chart on the wall, but for more advanced students who may be learning about this in their science class, they could perhaps do the conversion on their own. So they're saying, oh, it's 24 degrees Celsius, what is that going to be in Fahrenheit? So again, you can see on my blog, I have a picture of what that conversion chart looks like on the wall. But the great thing about this particular website, and again, every country is linked right to it so you can see it in real time, that it has the visuals and it says in the morning, the afternoon, the evening, and then it goes on to talk about what's going to happen tomorrow, and it has the days of the week on there. So you can talk about how the weather might change or how it is going to be different later in the day. But again, it's very visual and you can compare it to everything you had talked about earlier. And then we look at time, and I begin by asking students if they think that there is a time difference between the country that was chosen when we first started. And so we could say, again, Nicaragua, is that there a time difference from the city where we live in or the country that you live in? And if so, how many hours? Is it earlier or later? So what's the time difference there? And then when you click on the link, you can see what is the time in that very moment in the country that is linked. This also provides an excellent opportunity to look at concepts such as daylight savings time, because the same country may be a different time depending on the month when you're looking at it, and then seeing that, oh, your country does daylight savings time, maybe the country that you're looking at doesn't, so the time might end up being a bit different. So you can see that we start our calendar talk by focusing on our world. So what is our date? What's going on in our world? What is the weather here? And what is the time here? So you're looking at very much what is happening in our country, what is happening in our city, what is happening in our town, or even in our school today. And then we pick a flag, and then we're able to dive into what does that look like in that country as well. What is the time there? What's the time difference? Lots of opportunities to use numbers in a communicative way. And then looking how the weather is now, how it might be later in the day. Another time to look at the difference between Fahrenheit and Celsius. That's another cultural thing. And how weather is different in different hemispheres and what's going on there. And then having the map as well so that you can look specifically at some of the bordering countries and those different aspects. So starting at home and then branching out, and through all of that, reinforcing what is the nationality of this country and the colors of the flag and everything going around from there. I particularly like this process with students because it gives them a regular opportunity to use a lot of these common and necessary language elements in a very contextualized way. And it also organically exposes them to different ideas in weather and time and geography. And as students engage in reading and various authentic documents from the target language culture, I will tell you they often refer back to the details that they learned during these calendar talk activities because it helps to contextualize these different places in the world. And even when they pull out the same flag in the future, or even tomorrow they pull the same flag and we look again, it's going to be a different time during the day, and they'll remember if they pull it out in 2 weeks, oh, that is in a different time zone, so they'll remember that. So it helps to contextualize these things that help them to better understand the similarities and differences of these topics between their country and the target language country. So a couple of tips that I will give for implementation, if you want to try this based on what has worked and what hasn't, is to keep it visual and interactive. Use these slides that have all the embedded links for the weather, the time, and the geography, like the Google Maps. It really helps with keeping it compelling for students. And be sure to differentiate for different proficiency levels. So if you're looking at novice, you definitely want to do more scaffolding with the visuals and sentence starters and having those right on the slides. But then when you have those intermediate and advanced students, use many more open-ended questions and encourage more spontaneous language language and maybe thinking about what things might be or how it could be, or what would you like to do there, knowing that this is the weather today based on what you know about this country. So you can definitely move beyond just saying the weather. That's a novice level, but then you can definitely do calendar talk in a very interactive way with more intermediate students. And then set clear routines, establish a predictable order. So starting with greetings and then looking at the date, the weather, the time, and then the country comparison from there. So you can do those comparisons between what's going on in your world right now and what's happening in the target language country. And then just make it fun, incorporate humor, student birthdays or imaginary events, and keep the activity lively and engaging. And if students want to talk about their pet's birthday, that's great. If they want to say what they think their mother's age is, but they really have no idea, just keep it engaging and fun. And I always tell them if they want to say it's somebody's birthday, I'm not going to check the facts. If you have a cousin whose birthday today and you're able to talk about who your cousin is and how old they're turning and all that, and you can do it in the target language, fine, go for it, make it up. I'm not going to check the facts on that. So if you have not done a calendar talk, hopefully this has sparked your interest. And if you have done them, maybe you got some new ideas and different ways to look at it. But I definitely encourage you to go to my blog, wolclassroom.com/calendar talk, or go directly to the link in the show notes of this episode, and you can get the link to copy my slide deck that I use for my calendar talks directly to your Google Drive. And it's totally free, and you can do whatever you want with it from there. And if you do teach another language, because this one's in Spanish, it's pretty obvious the whole setup of it, and you can use it as a template to create your own. So while you're in the show notes, you'll also see the link to sign up for Talking Points, which is my weekly email newsletter with tips and resources for language teaching. And there are also links to get in touch with me if you would like to work together. And remember, we can do that in person in your school or remotely. Well, give Calendar Talk a try, and I'd love to know how it is going for you. I will talk to you soon. Bye for now. Thank you for listening to the World Language Classroom podcast. Be sure to follow or subscribe wherever you're listening so that you never miss an episode. Let's keep the conversation going on social media. Connect with me on X, aka Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at WL Classroom. And for even more valuable resources, visit my website, WLClassroom.com, where you'll find over 300 blog posts about language teaching. So stay inspired, keep growing, and continue making a difference in your language classroom.